Hi, I'm Carrie and welcome to So Darn Fun. This is a channel that focuses on quality clothing alterations, pattern reviews, and useful sewing how-tos. Today is a pattern review on the chai dress from Itch to Stitch. This is one of the items I'm going to be taking with me on a tropical holiday coming up in just a few days. Stay tuned. So being that I had actually printed this pattern out 2 years ago when I bought the pattern, I don't have any footage of taping it together and doing anything with the pattern. So we're just gonna pick up from the muslin that I made. I'm actually making the dress, but I only did the top part for the muslin. A top is an option for this pattern. So let's just pick up where I have my muslin and am noting some changes that need to take place. All right, and here's my muslin for the top portion of this dress, and I can already detect that there's some changes that I need to make. Let's just take a look at the general fit. The back is what I notice mostly, and I think that some of this pulling is due to it's just a little bit snug. I think if it was looser, I'm not going to have this pulling right here kind of around my pudgy parts. And I notice that I've got some diagonal lines through my shoulder blades. Diagonal always means it's a depth issue, which means I need to take some sort of a dart. Plus there's some of this right here. If I change the shoulder angle right here at the edge of my shoulders, it picks up some of that and gets rid of some of those lines. So I think I can do that and get rid of a couple issues. The other one is, I do believe I need more circumference, so I should have graded out to a larger size right here in my midriff. What I'm going to do is repin this, come back and show you what those changes actually look like, and then I'm going to resew my muslin with those changes and come back and see what the outcome is. Then we'll take it to the pattern and I'll show you what it looks like to do those pattern changes. Here I am with the new pinning. First, let's show my shoulder pinning. So I've got the original seam line is going to be up here, and then it'll taper quite a bit here. It's probably a 1/2 inch pinch on either side. And that picks up those drag lines in the back. I've loosened this in the center front at my waist 1 inch from here all the way down to the bottom of my muslin. And that's given me more circumference around here, which I think just hangs a lot better. Now, there's some little lines through here, but I think that's because my armhole is pulled up so close to my armpit at this point. I need to redraw the armhole just to lower that armpit a little bit. Other than that, I think the fit's going to be good for my real garment, and loosening it up here is going to help. I'm kind of amazed that the shoulder angle has to be taken up so much, but I know I do have a little bit of a sloped shoulder, and the collared look where it comes so high, I just probably am more of a softer slope. If I had more squared shoulders like that, it would take care of the extra that's just kind of lagging around here. So let's give that a try. I'm going to resew this muslin and be right back. Before I resew that muslin, I'm going to take care of the collar issue that I noticed and how I address a rounded back issue that helps my collar lie better against my neck. So let's take a close-up at the collar here, how it kind of angles away from my neck. I'm going to try a rounded back adjustment in this muslin and see if I can get the collar to fit more on my neck right there. This is how I make a rounded back adjustment for my muslin here. So this is the back piece. I've got it laid down, and I'm going to measure 3 inches below my collar line here. And I'm going to draw a line straight across from armpit to armpit. So I got a line straight across there. Then I'm going to cut, but I'm going to leave it attached at each end. We're going to make this simple without too many lines and cuts and moving. It really isn't that complicated. Then we're going to slide a strip of fabric underneath. Because I'm fitting myself, I'm going to first off just guess about how much that I need. I'm going to go with probably 1/2 inch in the very middle. Let's measure that so that I know what I've got. Okay, 1/2 inch. And I'm going to pin the top and bottom, and then let this taper back to its original at the armpit. Same for the other side. You might hear some happy children playing out in the water. It's a nice sunny day, and I've got some grandkids over here. Okay, so this is what I've got. I'm gonna go try this back on again and see if this amount gives me enough to kind of bring that collar a little bit farther up on my neck. So I'll see you in the fitting room. So honestly, I can hardly believe myself how much that 1/2 inch difference made in the back here. It hugs my neck so much better than it did before. So that is an adjustment I obviously need in this pattern. And I know you're wondering, how do I do that kind of adjustment when the back is cut on the fold? Well, keep watching because I will show you. Let's take a look at the adjustments that I made on my muslin and how I translate that to my pattern. So first what we're gonna do is take a look at that shoulder angle. You remember that I had to pinch out about 1/2 inch, which I think is more than most people would ever need, at the point of my shoulder, and then taper it back to the original seam. So we've got 1/2 inch at the tip of the shoulder, back to the regular seam line up at the neck, draw a line. So when you come back to the seam line up toward the neck, make sure that you're basically back to the original seam line within your seam allowance. And on this pattern, it's 1/2 inch, so I need to be back at my regular seam allowance, 1/2 inch in from here. So that's what I'm going to do for that shoulder angle. And then remember, I needed a little bit more in my midriff. So I have some strips of paper, and being that I've already cut my pattern out, if you haven't cut your pattern out, you can just use the paper that's already in excess. But for mine, I'm just going to tape a piece of paper underneath it here. This is a much bigger piece than I need, but it will serve the purpose here. And because I need to expand my waist section, here's where the waist connects, I need 1 inch total. And because I have basically 4 seam lines, 2 on each side, I only need to expand it by 1/4 inch, which seems like such a small amount, but boy did that 1 inch make a huge difference on my muslin. So here is my 1/4 inch. I'm going to taper that back to the original seam line, right about below the armpit. Draw that line there, and then I'm just gonna connect this waistline over like that. That's going to be my new cutting line. And then again, on the other side, same deal. Wait, let's measure and see how the original seam line is like 9 3/8. So I want to make sure it stays the same. So it needs to go to here. Okay, so what you need to do to know where that comes out at is measure the original seam line and then sort of pivot it out so that the length is going to be the same, and make sure you make a mark right there so that when you draw this out, it needs to come to that line that you drew. So see right here, it's just a little bit south of the original pattern right there, because you want to maintain this length right here. So on the waistband pieces, I added circumference to the side portions where the side seams are, but to the skirt, I am adding the circumference to the center front and center back because it's a straight seam. I didn't want to mess with the curves of the hip. And you can see I'm adding 2 inches onto the length. These patterns are drafted for somebody a little bit shorter than me, and I carry much of my height in my legs. So I wanted to add a little bit of length to make sure that the dress falls right around my knee level. Now let's do that rounded back adjustment that we did. This is how we have it pinned in, right? But we know that this is cut on the fold. So this is what we need to do. Remember, the widest part here is 1/2 inch, and that's in the center back. So when you fold that in half, you can see it now is a wedge. That's what we need to do to our paper pattern. So let's set that aside. Here's our paper pattern. We had measured on our muslin 3 inches from the neck edge, or approximately 3 inches. So I've got a mark here that's 3 inches. And I'm going to draw that straight over to the armhole. And I'm going to cut just like I did on my fabric. But I'm not going to cut all the way through that armhole edge. I'm going to stop short so that I have a hinge. See? There's my little hinge. It will change very slightly the shape of my armhole right here, but that is how it's supposed to. Then I've got another piece of paper. I'm gonna tape that underneath. And my spread right here needs to be 1/2 inch, and it is almost that naturally. Okay, so that's how I need to tape that. 1/2 inch. Okay, so I can get rid of this extra bit over here at the armhole edge. And this part here, you notice, here, let's just cut this off. It does create a little bit of a round right here. The last thing that I need to do is, remember I dropped those armholes 1/2 inch to make up for the fact that I had this shoulder take up right there. So let's go ahead and do that right now to this piece. And I will do this to the front and back, but I'm just gonna show you on one piece. There's 1/2 inch, I'm gonna drop it there. You can freehand it, but I take my French curve. I'm gonna meet up with this notch here. And that will give me a dropped armhole and plenty of room for my arm. So that's all the pattern work. Let's get to cutting this out of fabric now. Just real quick before I cut all the pattern pieces out, I'll show you the layout for this back piece that's cut on the fold. So here's the lower edge, that's lined up. This is the fold over here. The upper edge, I'll pin down right there. And this tiny, tiny curve here does go off of the fabric. I'm going to ignore that. And I'm just gonna cut out the rest of my pattern piece as is. Here's all the pieces cut out, and you'll notice that my skirt pieces up here also have some little liners that go down part way that I will be sewing in, kind of like an underlining slash slip, but it'll be sewn into the side seams because this fabric is pretty thin and I don't really want it to be see-through. Our bodice pieces, pockets, collar stand, waistband pieces, there's inside and outside portions of that. So I'm going to get to the sewing machine and start sewing this beautiful dress together. Checking in here, so far this has been a really pleasant sew. There have been no issues, no problems, it's been very enjoyable. So the only thing that I have left to do here, I need to hem, but we also need some buttons. This dress has 12, I think, 12 buttons, including one up here on the collar stand. So let's go choose out those buttons, get those put on. I'll probably put the buttons on and then decide exactly how long I want it in case I don't want to do the standard hemming. Remember, I added 2 inches to the length of that skirt because I thought I wanted it longer than the pattern. We'll see. Let's get those buttons chosen out. So I'm just going to default to these mother of pearl buttons that I did on the last dress that I had, mainly because I have so many of them and it's really hard for me to find in my button stash 12 of the same kind of buttons. So I think these will work. So I'm not going to show you the sewing on of the buttonholes and the buttons. You get the idea. So let's just get down to the fun part, and that's how the dress looks. So what more is there to say about a dress that was really fun to sew, that fits well, other than these pockets are awesome. The depth is perfect. I'm so glad that I could just drop my cell phone in there and it actually fits and it's not going to fall out. It's a little breezy today. I could have made the waistband tighter, but honestly I didn't want it to because I'm going to a hot, muggy place and I didn't want it to cling to me. The armholes feel good. It fits well. I'm glad I did that rounded back adjustment. The collar snugs up on my neck. I love the way that it feels in the breeze. I will be in a breezy, muggy climate and this dress is going to be perfect. Plus, I think the length is perfect. I'm glad I added 2 inches onto this dress. So now on to my So Darned Fun score. I scored patterns in 5 categories. Those categories are the pattern price, and included in that is how many views you get for the one pattern you buy, the price you pay, etc. Number 2, was it easy to assemble? There can be complicated patterns and easy patterns. I grade it in the range of 0 to 10. Third category is clarity of instructions or clear directions. I include the printing instructions clear, as in which pattern pieces you need. Sometimes some companies leave out pattern pieces you need to print. Also, are the directions easy to follow in constructing the garment? Next category is fit out of the box. Now, I've had a couple comments on why I include this category because it's not a very useful category to them, but this is why I do it. When I was a new sewer, I kind of expected that if I was to make something for myself, it was going to fit better than something that I would buy at the store. And much to my disappointment, I found that that wasn't exactly true. I didn't know how to alter my patterns beforehand way back when, so I would just sort of nip and tuck afterwards and try to make something that was acceptable to wear. But I did find that there were some pattern companies where the fit just tended to be better for my body. So to me, I score these according to how I am affected by it. So if something fits me better without me having to make any changes, then I know that that pattern designer has worked into that pattern certain depth issues, for instance, that are my issues. So I would rather not make the changes if I don't have to, but in some I do. Patterns are different, and some of you have the same pattern issues that I do. Some of you do need the slope shoulder. Some of you do need the rounded back, and some of you do need the sway back. It doesn't matter what your size is. Those are still the same depth type of issues. And if the pattern designer has worked some of those fixes, then you might want to know that. So I think that it could be useful to you. If it's not useful to you, then just bear with me and understand that it might be useful for other people. Last one, ease in making fitting adjustments. You might wonder why I have that one too, because a lot of the fitting adjustments are just easy to do, but there could be some pattern designs where there are seam lines that run through places where you would normally slash and make alterations, and some people are confused on how to do that. An example would be like a raglan or a dolman sleeve. If you need a rounded back adjustment, how do you draw that line? That's not the case in today's pattern, but that's why I do score the ease in making those fitting adjustments or alterations. So let's get on to the scoring. Number one, pattern price. The price I paid for this pattern 2 years ago was $12. That is still the pattern price today. There has been no increase on it. In this pattern, you get the pattern for the dress and the top. You have a sleeveless option and you have a short sleeve option. There are no other skirt options or anything else. It is the same look for both the dress and the top, which I think is super cute. But there is no long sleeve option. So if you wanted to put a long sleeve on it, you would have to find a sleeve off of another pattern and measure that armhole and see if it's going to fit. But this pattern does not include that. It could have included that, but I'm guessing that perhaps the designer thought that for this dress, a long sleeve just would not look right with it. Well, for whatever reason, it does not have a long sleeve. It just has short sleeve and sleeveless. So I think there just could have been maybe a few more variations and things that you could do that would kind of give you more bang for your buck. So because of that, I'm going to score this pattern a 9. Next category, ease in assembly. Was it easy to assemble? I mentioned earlier that this actually was a joy to sew. This was a fun sew. I didn't find anything difficult. The only thing that I might point out is that there's a couple different ways you can finish off the facings of the waistband and of that collar stand. The way I chose was to basically baste it from the outside and then stitch in the ditch to secure that waistband down. You could do it by hand. A lot of you will choose to do it by hand. Either way, it's going to look great. Just follow the instructions. I felt that it was an easy sew. So that scores a 10. Next category, clarity of instructions. Were the directions easy to follow? This kind of goes hand in hand with the ease of assembly, but I've got to say that the clarity of instructions, the illustrations, was spot on. It was very, very good, very professional. I love the illustrations. I thought that they were just exactly what I was looking at on my table. From the instructions for printing the pattern to the construction of the garment was all stellar. It was all very, very good. The one thing that I want to point out that I particularly liked was when in the directions for constructing the dress, the view that I was doing, the dress view, the sleeveless dress view, it would tell me in a different color text where I needed to jump to. So there was no confusion about where my instructions were appropriate to me. It told me exactly where to go. I thought that was done really, really well. So hey, good job. It's just it. That gets a 10. Fit out of the box. This is that questionable category for some of you. Here's what I'm going to say. The fit out of the box for me, first of all, I made the mistake by using the pattern that I assembled and cut out 2 years ago. I should have graded my waist out just a little bit, probably to the next size up. I sewed an 8 so that you know what size I sewed. I don't give out my measurements. That was a question asked. I don't give measurements, so it's not useful to you. Well, I'll tell you, I sewed a size 8. There's reasons I'm not going to get into why I can't just give out my measurements right here on a platter to you. But I sewed an 8 all the way through. I should have graded out to a 10 around the waist. But the way that I graded it out after I printed the pattern by taping on those pieces is exactly the same way that you would do if you were to draw those lines out on your pattern. So if you need to grade out to a larger size, then just draw those lines out on your pattern before you cut it and you'll get the same result. Print a couple sizes so that you know where your next sizing line is. So I am not going to take away any points in this category because that was my fault. I should have done that to begin with. But what I will talk about is the angle of the shoulder, which is a depth issue, and the rounded back, which is also a depth issue. So I'm going to make those changes so that it fits my body. I did have to do a sloped shoulder adjustment. And I did have to do a rounded back adjustment. So because I try to be fair in my scoring, and for each adjustment that I have to make that is not a size adjustment, but rather a drafting or depth issue, I will take the points away. So I'm going to score that one an 8. Just because it didn't fit me perfectly out of the box. Take that what you will. This is for me, my scoring for me. Next category, ease in making fitting adjustments, which has to do exactly with the fit out of the box. So they kind of go hand in hand. The adjustments were basic alterations. They were easy adjustments. There were no seam lines that got in the way. If there was some princess seaming or even, like I mentioned before, like a raglan or dolman sleeve, there might be seams that people might not know what to do with and how to make these adjustments. This was just plain, straightforward fitting adjustments. There were no issues whatsoever. So being that it was so easy peasy, there was no fancy stuff that got in the way, that's getting a 10. So the total grand score of the Itch to Stitch Chai dress is a 47. This is a dress, even though I haven't done anything that scored a perfect 50, but even though it's a 47 and not a 48 or 49, this is so cute. I have my eye on that top, even the cover photo with the black polka dots. I have fabric very similar to that, and that's what I originally wanted to make, but then decided when this trip was coming, I really needed a dress, a nice flowy dress. This is a really, really cute pattern. I would encourage you to check it out and see if it's something that you like, see if it's something that you might want to make, and visit itchtostitch.com. They have a lot of cute stuff. Very cute stuff. So I don't receive any compensation of any sort to review this pattern or to say nice things about it. I do not have an affiliate link. So this is truly an unbiased view. Next video I send you, I might actually be on vacation. Have a small style show of just a few items that I've made to take with me. Then I'll give you the pattern information on which patterns I used in case you happen to like them. So I hope you learned something today. Thank you for liking and subscribing. Remember to keep on sewing. I'm sure that it makes the world a kinder place. See you next time.